Lovely big mirror. That is a big fish. Probably nearer 10 pounds, that one. I thought it was about 6 or 7 pounds. It's probably nearer 10. Right in the side lip. Well, it's still not giving up. Absolutely full of energy, these. I'll try and lift it up. Lovely fish, ever so absolutely beautiful. Look at that, the size of that, pure muscle, probably about 10 pounds. On the waggler, caught shallow. Absolutely beautiful. We're going to pop them in the net now. Just be ever so careful with them. Just don't want to mark them or anything. Just lower it in gently. Hi, my name's Will Raison. I'm currently an England international and also a consultant for Darwin, with over 20 match wins this season to my name. Whilst I'm not fishing, I also write for Advanced Pole Fishing. I'm here today at Gold Valley Lakes to show you how to catch carp on a waggler. Gold Valley Lakes are a complex of lakes that were originally at gravel diggings. When my family bought them 8 years ago, we decided to try and turn them into a carp fishery. By this, we actually drained the lakes, levelled the bottoms out, and stocked it with a prolific head of carp, roach, bream, tench, virtually everything that swims apart from predator fish. The lake I've chosen today is the Middle Lake, which is one of the shallowest ones on site and has been fishing very well over the last 2 or 3 weeks. We've had some very big competitions here, one of which was last weekend, which was the Ultimate League final, which I have to say I was disappointed not to win as it was on my home ground. But after 2 matches I was winning it, and then everything just seemed to go wrong. I drew a bad peg, and just to give you some confidence, even I can't catch them sometimes, and I did no good at all. Like I say, there's a prolific head. They've just come over spawning, which means that they could be quite hard to catch. But I'm quite confident, sat on this peg, 75, it's one of my favourite pegs, and I think throughout the day we should have some encounters with some carp. What was an absolutely gorgeous day, it seems to have turned into a rather nasty one. There's quite a strong side wind just developed, and there's some rather dark clouds, and I've even just heard some thunder. So I'm not exactly sure what's going to happen with the fish or the camera crew for that. And I think it's time to maybe even put a coat on. Cool, this one's really going. It's right up. If this was a match, I think I'd be shouting to the chap 2 pegs up. It really is pulling. Just pulled the rod straight round. I just shallowed up a bit and cast out, and it pulled the rod straight round. Really is a big fish, and it's about 2 or 3 pegs to my left at the moment. So I've got my rod locked out, and I'm on a heavy line and a big hook, so there's a chance of getting it in, but you never know with these carp because they're so lively. They really do know how to fight. The water's ever so warm and the oxygen levels are high, and they just really have got so much energy, and when you hook a good one, you know that you've got it on. It's good fun. Just got to try and not go mad, not pull its head off, just go nice and gently, but at the same time exerting pressure just to try and wear it down. I've got to do something that I don't like to do now. It's swung right round. I'm just changing the angle of my rod, and there it is. It's on top. You can just see it coming up on top. It's a lovely big common. It's not ready for the net yet. Yep, there it is. I'm just going to keep pulling, and he's there. Lovely big common. Probably about 5.5, 6 pound. Pure fighting machine. Caught on the waggler about 3 foot deep. Absolutely beautiful. Not a mark on it. I'm going to plop that one in the net and get on and catch some more. Just going to put 3 red maggots on and cast straight back out, because although I started off fishing on the bottom, I've now shallowed up. With the wind dropping and the sun coming out, the fish are definitely coming up in the water. I just shallowed up and I caught that one almost immediately. Pulled the rod right round, and the important thing is just to keep maggots going in all the time. I had another little bite then, probably a liner more than a bite. Just going to keep maggots going in and just keep moving the float to keep the maggots on your hook in the surface layer. There's a swell there then. There's plenty of fish there. I'm not sure if they're all feeding, but there's definitely 1 or 2 there to be caught at the moment. I just hope that the wind doesn't get up. There's another swell there then. Just keep moving it. There's quite a few there now. It really is coming alive now, my peg. Now since the wind's dropped, and there's a lot of carp there. I've just cast straight back out again and the rod went straight round. I just fired a pouch full of maggots in and I saw 3 or 4 swell, and the rod just went straight round, and this one's not quite as big as the last one, but it's still a good fish. It's coming all the way in, but you've got to be so careful sometimes, because they try and fool you. They come all the way in and you think you've got them, and then they just take a sudden lunge like that one. It's gone off again. He's coming in now. Right down under my keep net, but you've still got to be careful. Just wait for him to be beat. Don't rush, just wait, because they're all big fish, and that's another nice common up on top. And in the landing net. Probably about 4 pounds. Very nice fish. Still fighting in the landing net. Can be a job to get hold of sometimes. There you go. Probably about 4 pounds of common carp caught on the waggler. Absolute pristine condition. Absolute perfect. I think it's time now to start feeding and go straight back out and hopefully catch another one. One thing I will say is when you're putting them in the net, is just to lower them in with your landing net nice and gently. You don't want to be seen dropping them or anything like that. Just be nice and careful with them, because at the end of the day, if you don't treat them right, there's going to be less in the lake, and that's the most important thing. Just going to, again, 3 red maggots. I prefer red because they're darker, and I think when fish are feeding up in the water, darker colours stand out more against the sunlight or against the sky, because the sky is predominantly white or blue, and a darker colour, in my mind, will stand out much more. Just a little flick to sink the line and carry on with the feeding. The most important thing when you're fishing like this is to have constant feed hitting the water. There you go, straight in again then. But I think that one just felt the hook. Just as I went to fire some bait out then, I saw my rod tip going round. Yeah, it might even have been a liner, but I think it was a bite. Just out again. Like I was saying, the most important thing is to keep the feed going in regular. Get them competing for the bait. If you can do that and they're willing to feed, you've got a real good chance of having a good day fishing like this. There really is some out there now. As you can see, I've a couple of pouchfuls of maggots in and then just moved my float. Just waiting for the float to go and the rod to pull round. It's a nice bite from a carp. There's plenty out there at the moment. Well, the conditions have certainly changed. Here on peg 75 on the middle lake, a little while ago things were looking pretty gloomy, but the conditions are, there's a slight wind, the wind's died down, the sun's been out, and things are looking up. There's quite a few carp out there, and it's nice warm wind at the moment, and I think we're going to end up catching a few today. We just had a good response. But when it was cold and the rain was coming down, there wasn't so many fish around, and since it's warmed up, there's swirls. I can see a swirl out there now, about 2 metres from my float. It really is starting to happen. It's not going to be too long before I think we start lining a few carp up. There you go, there's one on there now. It's just brightened up a little bit, and I'm immediately into one. I just cast my float out. Oh, yeah, it's a nice mirror by the look of it. Very nice fish. Still not giving up yet. Really isn't happy. There it goes again. They really do know how to fight. Just take your time and it's pointless rushing them because they're all nice fish and they're big fish, and you can see him down here now. He's still fighting. He's probably looking for somewhere just to try and snag me on a boulder or something, but I don't think that there's any in this peg. Got to be careful. He's right down here. Here he comes. Nice one, probably about 3 or 4 pound. Here he comes. I'm going to try and get him this time when he comes up. They just can't keep their heads up. They really do know how to fight. Here we go. He should pop up soon because I've had a lot of strain on him and he can't keep going forever. Here we go. There he is. There he is. He's mine. Nice mirror there. Nice one. Probably nearer 4 pounds actually. Just unhook him. Drop that in there. Still fighting in the net. There you go. Lovely fish. And hopefully, if the conditions stay the same, there should be plenty more where that one came from. Just going to pop him in the net and get straight back on with it. Going to put 3 red maggots on and whiz it straight back out there. Most important thing when you're fishing like this, especially with a wind like this, is to get your line sunk. Now a lot of people will cast past where they're actually fishing and then bring it back, but one of the things with this sort of fishing is that I've come to realise is the splash of your float can sometimes attract them. So when your actual float lands and you have to sink your line, you don't want to move your float that far away from where it's landed. So a little trick I've learned is just to whiz it out there like that, and as it lands, you just put your rod about a foot under the water and then a little flick like that, and all the line is immediately sunk. And that, to me, is the best way. Now, the float has probably only moved about a foot from where it landed. And now I know that immediately, without feeding, there's a little splash to attract a carp, and if I don't catch one like that, I can just move it into the feed. And that is definitely a very, very good tip for this sort of fishing. Again, just keep the feed going in, and there you go. Oh, no, I lost that one. It pulled the rod round straight away again. I'll just show you that cast again. All my maggots are still on. Cast out and just make sure the line's straight and a little flick like that. It does take a little bit of practice, but I can assure you, once you've got it right, you will not sink your line any other way. A lot of people will cast right out, put their rod under the water and have about 5 or 6 winds, and then you're nowhere near where that initial splash of your float was, and there could well have been a carp coming to that splash and you've missed out on it. Obviously, working and living on site, I've got an advantage over a lot of people of knowing where to go and what conditions to look for. The peg I've chosen today, which is 75, on the back bank of Middle, to me is probably one of the best waggler areas on the complex, let alone this lake. As you might be able to see, it's a nice straight bank, which means no one's got any advantages of being out on points and holding the fish out. Conditions I'd look for, if I was wanting to catch on a waggler, like I am today, would be almost as it is now. Earlier, the wind was on and it was raining, and to catch shallow or deep on a waggler, that makes it very, very hard, because your float's moving through, you can't feed that accurately, and it just makes it so, so hard. Also, one of the main things about this bit is there's a very shallow plateau running the full length of this bank at about 15 metres, which is the ideal distance to fish the waggler, and there's always a lot of carp on it. The one other thing that I would look for, not only on this water, on any water that I went to, if I'd never fished it before, if I'd fished it all the time, is to try and get in the middle of a bank. Don't go towards the corners or just out of a corner. The middle of a bank is always, for some reason, one of the best places. I think the carp run up and down the middle of the lake, and a very central point, you're more likely to catch them. And that is one other thing I would definitely look for. Of course, the only thing when you're fishing on your own on a bank like this is the wildlife. With constant feeding to try and get the carp in your peg, you end up with a situation like I've got, a family of 5 ducks. And it can be quite hard to gauge how many maggots to put in, because, oh, there's a carp. Straight away. You might have noticed then that I have the back wind off, so the reel can't actually back wind, but I've got the clutch set so the fish can't break me. Main reason for this is that when I keep twitching my float, I don't have to worry about getting tangles around my reel. Because everything's locked apart from a forward movement, I can't get any tangles. And when you get a ferocious take like that one was, if you've got any sort of tangle around your reel, you'll end up with your line being snapped. And in a match, that can cost you the match, and even in just a pleasure day, it could cost you the biggest fish of the day. And a lot of anglers don't like to use a clutch, but I certainly do. Not necessarily when I'm actually playing them, but while I'm fishing for them. So if one takes it, the clutch is there just as like a safeguard. This one feels quite a good fish. It's right in underneath. Right in underneath the keep net. This one could be a real good one. The sun's out now, it's absolutely perfect for him. This one's not giving up yet. Definitely a bigger fish, this one. Really using his weight. Haven't caught a glimpse of him yet. He's just searching down around there. This is when you've got to be ever so careful with them, because you don't know what's down there, that they can just loop your line round and ping and it'll be off. Just take your time, but just keep the pressure on. As he goes off. Here he comes. Yeah, it's definitely a bigger fish. It's not giving up yet. Very easy in these situations to become impatient and start pulling much harder than you should, but believe me, the main thing is just to keep constant pressure, and the fish will tire. If you start pulling harder and harder and harder, there's a good chance that the fish will actually come off. You'll just pull the hook straight out. Just take your time. He's running off that way now. He's definitely not ready for the landing net quite yet. Really is. Really is. Must be a good fish or just a lively one. I haven't seen it at all yet. certainly going, really is fighting. The rod's bent double and everything's locked out and just can't move him at the moment. He's off again, he's going out. Good tip when you get him in close, you can see I'm back winding now. If you actually put your rod down low and change the angle, you can see it's stopped immediately and it's coming back towards me. And that's a very good tip when you're playing fish like this. You can see now he's coming in. If I'd have kept my rod up, there's a good chance it would have been out in the middle by now. And again, then you've got to start playing him all over again, but yeah, it is a good fish, this one, I'm sure of it. Really is. Either that or it's a real lively one. No, it's a good fish. Looks to be about 6 or 7 pounds. The longer you have a carp on, the more chance you've got of that hook hold wearing, and all of a sudden you can end up oh, it is a lovely fish. I see him down there now. He's about to, oh, look at the size of that one. Not ready yet. Off again. If I was a little bit quicker then I could have scooped him out. As you can see, he's running off. Just put the rod down and immediately it stopped. And I can start bringing it in again. The only time you have to be careful when you're doing that is when there's a lot of snags in close. Because bringing your rod down enables all your line to get... I'm just gonna... Oh, it is a lovely fish. Come on. Here he comes. Yes! Lovely big mirror. Just going to click the back wind on so I don't get in any nasty tangles while I'm unhooking it. Oh, that is a big fish. Probably nearer 10 pounds, that one. I thought it was about 6 or 7 pounds, but it's probably nearer 10. It's right in the side lip. Well, it's still not giving up. Absolutely full of energy, these. I'll try and lift it up. Lovely fish, ever so. Absolutely beautiful. Look at that, the size of that. Pure muscle. Probably about 10 pounds. On the waggler, caught shallow. Absolutely beautiful. Absolutely beautiful. I'm going to pop him in the net now. Just be ever so careful with them. Just don't want to mark them or anything. Just lower it in gently. And he's away. Biggest fish of the day so far. Going to go straight back out and start off with the routine again. Of course, fishing like this, shallow on a waggler, does limit what fish you're going to catch. At the moment, fishing like this, if I caught anything other than a carp, I'd be really surprised. But if I was going to fish on the bottom on the same line, as there's such a big head of bream, tench and roach in here, I'd definitely be picking up one of those. And of course, it comes down to gambling. If you fish on the bottom, you're going to get plenty of fish, but they're not going to be anywhere near as big as the ones you catch on this. So in a match or any sort of competition, I'd be gambling and fishing for these bigger fish. I've already had some quite reasonable size ones, and anyone else who's fishing on the bottom getting pestered with roach and not so much pestered, but with fish that will not weigh as much as carp are going to be behind. And at the end of the day, if you can catch the bigger ones, you're going to be very hard to beat because you don't need to catch as many. Yeah, this one's another good fish. I can feel it banging its head. Took it as soon as the waggler hit the water, this one. A little splash from the waggler. I left it where it landed and the rod just went straight round. Very confident take. Quite a good fish as well. Not sure if it's going to be the biggest one of the day because I've had that one that might be 10 pound. But oh, it's another good fish though. Big swell there. Yes. Yeah. Nice long, slim carp, this one, by the look of it anyway. I've only caught a quick glimpse. But that just shows you the importance of being able to sink your line with that little flick. If I'd have moved that float any more than a foot from where it splashed, I probably wouldn't have hooked this one. Because it was literally, it just came straight to the splash of the float and the rod tip was round and it was on. Still fighting, it's just going off again. Got to be so careful with them because they're such a heavy fish and they're so fit. That hook hold just gets worse and worse by the second. She's right in under my feet now. I'm gonna pop up. There we go. Just remember, it's just not a race. It's just to take your time. Make sure. He's off again though. He's not happy. Bit of luck here, pop his head up in a minute. Come on. Come on. Making my arm ache. He's off again. Just put the rod down just to stop him. Probably about 5 or 6 pound by the look of it. It's a good fish. Considering the line and that I'm on, he really is putting up a fight. But, again, when you talk about trying to pick out the bigger ones and that, anyone that was fishing for anything other than carp up in the water today would find themselves seriously behind because they weigh so much. You don't have to catch as many and they're much bigger fish. And done right, they're not as hard to catch as some people think. Yes, another good fish, probably a little bit bigger than I thought again. Here he comes. Oh yeah, it's a lovely one. Nice long common. Still going for it though. Come on. They do. Here he comes. Come on. Still pulling. Just again put the rod down. Okay, you might be able to see I'm actually putting the butt of the rod towards my stomach, so just to give me that leverage. Helps sometimes when you've been playing a fish and your arm's aching a bit. Just helps just to put it almost like a sea angler would, almost like a butt pad, just to put it there and just use it as like a lever. There he is, up on top and he's in the net. Another nice one. Still fighting in the net. Yeah, lovely carp. Absolute pristine condition. An absolute fighting machine. Getting nice and gently into the keep net, just lowered in. Sure he's all right. And out for the next one. One of the most important parts about fishing like this, and fishing in general, is to be comfortable. Not necessarily what you're sitting on, but having all your gear to hand and fully functional, i.e. your bait tray, everything's to hand. You notice that I hardly have to move to pick my maggots up and fire them out. That is one of the most important things. You don't want to be reaching miles to be able to get your maggots or your worms or your ground bait. Also, your keep nets. Again, if you catch a carp of any size, especially a large one, you don't want to be having to pick it up and move 2 or 3 feet to put it in your net. It's right to hand, it's there. All I have to do is pick my landing net up and drop it in, it's there. Another thing you may have noticed is my second keep net. That is a lot of fishery rules now state that you have to have 2 nets. One for carp and the rest for silverfish or tench or anything that isn't really a carp. This is really just to protect them when weighing in, just to keep them separate, because if you get 5 or 6 large carp bouncing around on 5 or 6 small roach, obviously the roach are going to come off worse. And for the fishery, this is not good news. But again, they're both to hand, I don't have to move, there's no risk of me dropping a fish or anything. Another important part of your fishing tackle when fishing like this is your rod rest. As you might have noticed, my rod isn't pointing straight at my float. It's a slight angle. This is so when I get a really vicious take, if it was pulling straight on my rod, the chances are every time it would snap my line. And in a match or pleasure fishing, it isn't good. So if you have it just to one angle, you'll find that as your rod goes, you've got the bend of the rod, almost like a shock absorber. And this will cut down on lost fish, and it will just help you to land more and more fish. But like I say, the most important thing is to be comfortable. Everything to hand, making sure that you don't have to reach or stretch or put fish in any danger at all. Everything must be to hand. I'm surrounded by all the stuff that I need, and if you get it like that, that's one of the most important things. The tackle I'm using today is stuff that I've hand-picked from the Darwin range. Although all their range is good, to fish for carp, you do need something that's much, much stronger. The rod I'm using today is a 13-foot Connoisseur Z match rod. This is the Power Special. It's much more powerful through the middle, which enables me, when I'm actually playing a carp in close, I can actually lift the fish and hold it there, which in a match when you need to get fishing rather quick is half the battle. The The reel I'm using today, which is my particular favourite at the moment, is the new Daiwa 2500 IA. It really is a good reel. It's so small, I can control it with just one hand. And the clutch, which I like to fish with, is so smooth. Really, it's unbelievable. Virtually impossible to be broke with this clutch, providing it's set right. Really is a good bit of kit. The line that I've got on the reel is 8 pound Shinobi, which is actually 0.20, which may sound very, very heavy, but it is the same diameter as most 4 and 5 pound lines. And then coming down, the float is a Preston Tyson 4AA. It might sound a heavy float for these conditions, but the conditions can change. And let me tell you, it's always best to have a heavier float than you need, because you can still cast it out when the wind isn't strong, but if the wind happens to get up, you can still cast and fish how you have been. And I've just got 4 shots round, coming down. The main line is attached to the hook length by a double loop. Now the actual loop is tied a double loop itself, so there's a lot of strength and stretch there. Coming down, the hook length is the same line as the main line, Super Shinobi, but 1 strain lighter. This is the 018, which is still 6 pound. But if you were to compare this to most 4 pound lines, it still is very, very thin and supple. Coming down to the hook, I've got a size 14 Drennan feeder carp hook. Now, they're marketed as a feeder hook, but let me tell you, the actual shape and the strength of this hook is absolutely perfect for match carp fishing or any type of carp fishing. And at the moment, that is my favourite hook by a long, long way. While I'm on the subject of my actual tackle, what I'd like to do is show you how I plumb up. I'll put the plummet on. It's just a spring-loaded one. Now, I know this peg quite well, and I know it's probably about 4 foot deep. So I'm actually going to set it for what I think it is. Just move the shot up. Notice they slide. It's another thing while I'm here, you mustn't actually put your shot on too hard because you'll damage your line. If you see the line, there's no mark on it where that shot's been. Just move that one up. That one's a little bit loose, but that will slide okay. Right, so I've got my plummet on. I've got it set at the depth that I think it is. Now all I'm going to do is stand up with an underarm motion, put it out there. And if the float comes up, I know that I've got to go shallower. If it doesn't, I know I've got to go deeper. I'll just stand up and just a nice underarm, and that's out, right where I was been fishing. Now the float hasn't come up, so I know now that I'm too shallow, so I'm going to bring it in and just move it up. I know I'm not too far off. Just swing it in. I'll move it up about 6 inches. And then just go through the same procedure again. Just a nice underarm swing. Make everything tight. Just give it a couple of seconds to see if the float's going to come up. It still hasn't come up. I think it's only just below the surface, so I'm a little bit off on what I thought. Let's just move it up again. A little bit further this time. And that should be just touching bottom. Again, just another nice underarm swing, nice and in the same place. Then the float's just come up. So I know now I'm just touching bottom. Now one thing I do that a lot of people don't, not necessarily pleasure anglers, but good match anglers, which I think is a very important part of this. Now I've got my depth, if I can just get it out of the plummet. Now I've got my depth set, I know that that is on the bottom. But during the course of the day, I'm going to want to either shallow up or go deeper, but I may want to go back to the original depth. So a little trick I use, so just get a little blob of paint. It's this paint here, it comes off easily, so don't worry about marking your rod. And I just put a little blob right where the float is. Now, all day long, no matter how much I move that, I can relate to that, and I know exactly how deep it is. And that is one of the most important parts, because even when you're playing fish, if you have a carp come off in close, your float can move. And if you don't realise this, that can mean the difference between catching and not catching. Feeding is probably the most important part when fishing like this, or fishing anyway. When you're fishing up in the water for carp, it's not necessarily the amount, but how often that you feed. Sometimes they do want lots, like at the moment, the way that they're feeding, they want a lot of bait, which is probably because I'm the only one on the bank. But a lot of times, varying the amount of feed you put in. If you haven't got that many carp in your peg, obviously you don't want to be firing in 50 or 60 maggots every single chuck, or 3 or 4 times every single chuck. To get those few feeding quite confidently, 4 or 5 maggots might be better, or 6 or 7. But also, don't discount other baits like casters, hemp and worms. Worms is probably one of the best baits for carp, and yet not many people use them. But other baits like that will be for fishing more on the bottom. When you're fishing shallow, maggots is best, by a million miles. Maggots is the bait. But don't just go there and just lash in a pouch full every single chuck, because sometimes it just doesn't work like that. Just try varying it, put more in sometimes, and if you haven't got many in your peg, you can up your feed to try and pull them in your peg, and then when they're there, you can cut your feed down so you've got more chance of catching them. Main thing about carp fishing is feeding. Not just carp fishing, any fishing. If you get your feed right, you'll catch plenty of fish. By this I mean, when I'm fishing like this, is to keep it going in regular, all the time. Not necessarily pouchfuls and pouchfuls, but just to keep it going in regular. Sometimes by varying the feed, i.e. not putting as much in when there's fish there, or putting more in when there's not fish there to draw them in. It's just using your head. If you learn to use your head and try and think how the carp are feeding, you're going to end up catching a lot more fish. Well, the last 20 minutes or so has been quite slow, and in a match I'd probably be quite worried. One question I am asked quite a lot is, in a match when you've been fishing shallow, or even when you're pleasure fishing and the fish seem to go, what do you do to catch those extra ones? Well, what I try and do is keep feeding the same area, to keep any feeding fish that are in the area in your peg. But the chances are, if they've gone, the fish that you're going to be catching are the ones that have been eaten and haven't been caught, i.e. they've got an absolute belly full of maggots. Now, to do this, you're better off fishing where there's no bait going in, because a fish that is full up won't be anywhere near where there's a pile of maggots going in. So by that I mean, casting your float past your bait, you might pick up an odd one that's swimming past, or even to the sides, you'll pick up an odd one. By doing this, you could get those extra few fish that could win you the match. Oh. Unbelievable. Just, again, as I've been saying, if I'd have moved the float, that carp would have come to the splash and there'd have been nothing there. But as it was, I've left it in the same place and the rod was just going off the rest. Literally, the float hadn't been in the water more than 4 seconds, probably 3 seconds, and the rod was right round. Feels quite a good fish as well. Yes, probably, yeah, it's a good fish. Again though, they pull so hard. I'm just going to change the angle of the rod just to try and stop it. Try and persuade it not to run off too far. Right in close now. Oh yes, another big mirror I think. Here he comes. There he is. Yes. Not massive, but in a match I'd be very pleased with that at the end of the match, because sometimes they can just be that little bit harder to come by and still fighting in the net. Unbelievable the strength these carp have got. Right in the top lip, it was never ever going to come off. Quite a chunky one, this one. Absolute, probably about 5 pounds that one. Absolute solid muscle. It's just going to kick. pop him back in the net. Ever so gently again, just to stop them from hurting themselves or cutting themselves. This is a better one. I hope that swan doesn't get in the way. Sometimes they do when you drop maggots in the edge there. Oh, it's not that big. Still pulling though, they've got so much energy, that's unbelievable. I just locked the rod right out then and it still went. Another nice mirror. Still fighting. Still fighting. Still fighting in the net. And another nice mirror. Not a mark on it. Probably about £5. Oh. When we started this morning, with rain, thunder, and worst of all, a blustery wind, I must admit I wasn't sure how the fishing would turn out. There are so many things you can prepare and have absolutely perfect, such as bait and tackle. But in the coarse fishing game, it pays to expect just every type of weather. Because one thing's for sure, you don't want it to stop you fishing. Today it certainly paid off. The wind quickly died down and the sun made a very welcome appearance. The fish that then followed have been fantastic. I would say I've got a total weight of about 50 pounds, made up of 12 carp, a mixture of mirrors and commons. I do hope you've enjoyed watching them come in. I've definitely enjoyed catching them, and with any luck you've picked up a few new tricks and techniques that you'll be able to put into practice the next time you go out on the water. Right, let's see what we've caught. Got these new nets from Darwin which have a nice pull-through rim, which lets them go ever so safely. Oh, there's a good weight there. I'd have liked that yesterday, that would have been worth a lot of money in the match. Absolutely gorgeous. There's that real big one there, just going back, probably about £9. Lovely, lovely mirror. Absolutely brilliant day's fishing on the Waggler. That's what it's all about, a net full of fish. I just wish it was a match. Come on, out you come. Absolutely lovely day's fishing. $13 fish, I reckon that just went past 60. Just as a footnote, if I'd have caught that weight yesterday, I'd have won 10 grand. All the best.